Good evening to everyone that is joining us today for another episode of Hot Topics. Can you believe that we're almost nearing the end of our privilege series? It's been an exciting journey where we've unfolded various forms of privilege. And so today, with this being our second last episode, we're going to be looking at part 2 of heterosexual privilege. Last week, we spent some time with Anele and Notando, just kind of helping ourselves just gather our thoughts and understand what stuff around sexuality. And today we're going to be focusing on how those who are heterosexual have more privilege than those who belong to the LGBTQ plus community. And so for those who are not watching, we're just going to give a moment for everyone who's joining us today to just introduce themselves, and then we'll take it on from there. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Tando Shwota Galela, and I'm a student and also a member of the MCSA.
Ilse Swana, a clinical psychologist lecturer and a member of the MCSA.
It's great to have you guys joining us again today. We are excited to have you back. Hey everyone, my name is Ilse and I'm part of the Hot Topics team here at Grace Point.
And my name is Hloni part of the Grace Point team and part of the Hot Topics team. And so as we continue, we thought this week, let's just start with what everyone genuinely always wants to know when it comes to this particular topic. Now, God, the Bible, spirituality, and the LGBTQ plus A community. What are our thoughts around this? When it comes to how the church has responded, and when it comes to our understanding, rather, of spirituality and sexuality. What is a safe landing place for all people that people can basically gather themselves around? And this is for everyone.
I think for me, the basis of it all that saves me every day is the sanity of understanding that my sexuality or my sexual orientation, when it comes into my spirituality, it has no bearing. How my spirituality affects my sexuality, or how my sexuality affects my spirituality, is not a conversation in my life, because spirituality has no gender, spirituality has no sex, it has no sexual orientation. So why would I invest my energies and time in thinking about there's something mutually exclusive about me by virtue of being gay into how I relate with God? However, society and the Christian community has used a particular language to make it as if there's something inherently wrong if you are gay and you happen to know God or you happen to experience God.
Actually, Anela, you're bringing out something that I think is very important. So, for instance, just chatting to a friend, reflecting even on issues of sexuality in the church, this friend pointed out something that I just will never forget. He says, often what the church does is that the church has its own. So if you remember in Acts, the first time the church has a conversation about who's in and who's out is in the book of Acts. And this conversation has went on for centuries, actually. And you find that this conversation is often a projection of our own identity crisis as the church. So the church is not sure about its own identity, and often we project it onto others. You can go through history and check, and right now, if there's anyone we are projecting our identity crisis onto as the church, it has to be the LGBTQ plus A community.
I want to jump onto something that you said, that your spirituality and your sexuality are different aspects of you, that they don't necessarily inform one another, or they don't, they're not mutually exclusive. I'm personally of the belief that an identity is complex, and I'm sure you'll know more about that as a psychologist, of how complex identities really are and what builds it up, and how we like to limit someone to an aspect of their identity instead of seeing them in the full scope of who they are. And I think that's the same with the church, is often we'll see you as so-and-so that's this and this, and we limit you to that. And we see it in society in very different contexts. Like we'll say, hey, this is my friend Bill, he's an architect. Okay, so we're focusing just on the fact that he's an architect. It doesn't matter that he's this, and this. And so we find that also in the church with an expression of sexuality often, that we find ourselves limited. Is there a particular way that perhaps you've encountered that we can look at people as their whole, and this kind of contributes to inclusivity into the church?
Just if you comment for me, it's, I would never say or ask the question, Hloni, as a heterosexual man, what's your relationship like with God? And it has no bearing as a heterosexual man. When I say Hloni as a gay man, then there's an issue. Because that sexual identity or that sexual way of being, not even sexual way of being, but that preference is framed and constructed as problematic within the church context. So it goes back to what we're saying, that identity is fluid. Identity, again, can to some degree be a social construct, that certain identities are deemed to be legitimate and some identities are deemed as illegitimate. And for as long as church still deems homosexuality as illegitimate, even illegitimate bodies will come to church that is annually would be seen as that gay preacher. All right? So my sexuality becomes political. My sexuality becomes a determiner of inclusion or exclusion, just by virtue of that.
Sure. And maybe just to Tando. Yeah. So picking up from what Anele just spoke about, and then in your own experience, so what are some of the things that people might have said or people might have done, stuff that you're only comfortable sharing, that make you feel as though, no man, you know what? Literally, I feel as though my sexuality I'm being isolated because of my sexuality, how I'm being treated, how people respond to me, how people might actually engage me is not because they're just seeing Tando, but they are isolating this one. Obviously, everyone's complexities, and it's all important to see people's complexities, but they're isolating my sexuality because of their own issues around this.
I think it's quite interesting because the way people see me, they don't see Tando as a girl, but they see Tando as that girl that wants to be a boy. And it's the identity that they've given me, especially at church. And it was also an issue with the uniform and everything, where at some point I was once told that if you hold any leadership position within the church, then you might get excluded because you're not wearing what is prescribed for females and you identify as female. And I asked myself, does that have to do with who I am? What I'm wearing, does it have to do with who I am, or does it have to do with me as a person being there, me being physically there, or they have to look into what I'm wearing first in order to accept me? So it was one of those things where I was told that I might face exclusion due to that. And I don't know if it's something that's still yet to happen or it might not happen because I'll be able to speak up for myself. So most of the time, as any other girl, you won't have to face issues whereby you have to speak up for yourself and stand up for who you are and who you believe you are. But as Tando, that lesbian girl, I need to constantly tell people that I do not want to be a boy. I do not wake up and wish to be a boy, but they still give me that identity and that title, rather. Yeah.
And I think maybe just, Ilse, before you move on to the next one, I just want to put context for those of us who might not be familiar with the uniform that Tando speaks of. So in our traditional black Methodist churches, what we have is we've got like a movement called the Wesley Guild, and then there's a prescribed uniform for girls and the prescribed uniform for boys. And so I think Tando, because I was even stalking Tando on Instagram, and I was excited when I saw one of your pictures where you've literally taken a brave step of saying, I'm going to dress in a way that makes me feel comfortable because this is my identity. I'm going to claim it.
Yeah. And I think also that was one of the biggest challenges that I had to face. And it was really a matter of what do the books say and what does God say in this context and what do the elders in the church say?
Sure.
Because to my surprise, instead of the youth fighting or being on my side, they were the ones that wanted to distance themselves from the whole issue, and the elders had to come in place and be the ones that are there to advocate for me to be comfortable in who I am.
Sure.
So it was a bit dramatic, if I would say that, judging from how we would bond over, like they would ask questions of concern. I thought they were concerned, but it was more of curiosity than just finding out who I really am and how I identify as. And it was a matter of them deciding whether they like it or not, instead of actually being supportive.
Sure.
Sorry,
Go for it.
just
Go for
before
it.
I've been reading a lot about gender performance and gender performativity by Judith Butler and Foucault, right? They speak about something very interesting. This concept of intelligibility and non-intelligibility. Foucault, how Butler speaks about that gender is performative, right? Gender is expressed in various ways. And as I'm listening to Tando, she did gender in a very interesting way. She became an unintelligible object in the MCSA by virtue of what she did. Because what intelligibility says, intelligibility is we all have a code of engagement, right? So for you to be an intelligible, fully fledged Christian, part of it is heteronormativity. You can't be a staunch Christian, an acceptable, born again, only if you comply with compulsory heteronormativity. And that it means ticking all the boxes. So I think using that concept of Judith Butler and Foucault and Fanon and everyone, I and Tando, we become unintelligible Christians because we don't subscribe to what is being made to be correct. And I think that intelligibility, theologically, it then means we are the greatest sinners because we're doing what should not be done. We are bodies that disrupt the norm of compulsory heteronormativity. What we do with our sexuality and our gender expressions, we become destabilizers and protesters.
So you touched on heteronormativity, and I think maybe for the folks watching at home who have never had an opportunity to discuss this topic of heterosexual privilege, heteronormativity might be a foreign concept. Can I ask you guys to maybe give us, and that includes you, Hloni, to give us your understanding of what heteronormativity actually means and perhaps how it's informed some of the context you find yourself in?
I think it is the norms, rather what we need to, as a society, perceives us, like how you need to subscribe to how you do everyday life, where there are duties that are ascribed for male and there are duties that are for females only. And when it comes to relationships, friendships and everything, there are heteronormative way of doing things that you kind of need to conform to. So it's more about conforming to a certain standards that we were exposed to. Yeah.
Wow. I want to kick us to touch. I don't want to lose something here that I think is so important even for the church. So the church is convinced that we are convinced, the church. You know, I was in a conference yesterday and we are convinced that we have changed how things are done. You know, remember back in the days with catechist class and all of that, before you could become a member of the church, you know, the early Roman church, what used to happen is that you had to prove that you believe according to what we believe, and then only you could belong. You know? And what the church has now said is like, no, wait. Jesus actually invites people, regardless of their behavior and whatever. They are invited. So we believe that you belong, you believe, and out of the belief, the outcome is the behavior.
Then you become intelligible.
But exactly. But now, what your theory, what your experience, and how you have put it together with the whole idea of being intelligible, is that it tells me that, no, wait a second. The church has actually created it's almost like heteronormativity is a new standard that you need to conform to before you could actually fully belong in the church. So by having, for instance, by having gender binary uniform, it's a standard.
Yeah.
You know,
It
by
is.
saying there are particular roles for males and females in the church, it's a standard. All of these things are standards, and perhaps we're not where we think we are as a church. Can I throw that out there?
Yeah, it goes back to what we're talking about when she was defining heteronormativity, that it's all about binaries. And our main reference becomes Genesis procreation. Adam and Adam, not so Adam and Eve, no Adam and Adam, no Eve and Eve, right? And again, we don't even understand the theological understanding of that story of creation and how things were and how Adam is Adam, all of those kind of things. But that script gave us a lens of understanding that there are only two genders. And that's what heteronormativity says. It's compulsory that you must be a female or a male. You must be feminine, you must be masculine. You can't be the other. If you are the other, the language we have for you, you become an unintelligible subject in this space. So in the way I think about it and the way I see it, if we are outside of church, we're still unintelligible because, again, in society, we are perceived to be the ones that are destabilizing the whole entire system. Because when it comes into me, my family procreation ends. If I choose not to do surrogacy or other alternative forms similar to her. So compulsory heteronormativity is a script that we have to play along with in every aspect of our lives. At home, at work, in families, everything. That script determines our code of behavior. Sometimes we just have to play the game and just play chess to just continue living life. But that thing of compulsory heteronormativity, it's again that thing which leads us to what we spoke about last week, about these corrective therapies. Ideally, when you accept Jesus Christ, right, there must be something right with the sexuality. You can't accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior and still be gay. That's what is suggested, right? So part of it, you being a fully fledged Methodist, a fully fledged Wesleyan member, the heteronormative script says, be straight.
You've just touched on so much, and it's just so powerful what you've just shared with us. And something I want to pick up on there, and we really wanted to look at some stereotypes and some, some myths that we've encountered about the community and what that looks like in our daily lives. And so something I wanted to put out there as what I believe is a myth, or a stereotype that I've heard about the community, is that all heterosexual men should be feminine and all heterosexual women should be masculine. And something that I've started to understand, and I think, Tanda, you touched on that as well, was the difference between your sexual orientation and your sexual identity, and your gender identity, and that, that there's a split, that you might You might find yourself attracted as a woman, attracted to other women, but that doesn't mean that you're not a woman. You know, it doesn't mean you want to be a man. Maybe you can just share with us about your experience on that, and also your understanding of, is there a distinction? Is this a myth? Is this truth?
First of all, when you are in a relationship with someone of the same sex, the first question you'd get is, who's the man in the relationship? Which speaks more of dominance and power in the relation and the power dynamics in the relationships. And also with how you choose to present yourself, or rather how you choose to identify yourself. People get shocked if I choose to look masculine but still be in touch with my femininity. It's like, it's problematic because now you look like a boy but you want to act like a girl. So you basically have to choose a struggle. So you can't be both at the same time. And another thing with maybe the myths and everything is that, yes, if you identify as lesbian, then you need to look masculine. And if you're gay, then you need to be more feminine in order for the society to be able to understand, or rather be able to say, oh, that gay guy. So if any other guy would come and be like, I'm gay, and they'd be masculine and just have that dominance or masculinity presenting to them, it's more like a waste. Because why are you this masculine? Why are you this handsome? Why are you this gentle, caring, but you're still gay? Then what is left for us? Because that is what most of the ladies do say. Or rather, I've also gotten that way. I've come across guys who say, you're too beautiful to be lesbian. As if I chose to, I'm sorry, as if I chose to be lesbian, or rather as if my looks determine my sexuality. So it's another thing where some people just think that you choose. You wake up in the morning and you decide, okay, then today I'm going to be lesbian for the rest of my life. And it's okay, I'll face the backlash and everything. And it's not really a choice you wake up and, like, it's not a decision that you wake up and do in the morning.
Thank you.
I'll use Tanda's scenario to define and explain the acronym LGBTI, so that we understand what we mean when we speak of gender, sex, sexual orientation, sexual identity, sexual expression, gender expression. Because these are all things that people don't understand. That Tanda has beautifully explained that there's gender, right? And we do gender. We socialized that if your sex or your biological sex, you're born with a penis or a vagina, then it means you're a boy or a girl. But the socialization then comes with the naming of giving you the gender of what comes with what is expected from this body that comes with this penis and the vagina and all of that. Now, the understanding is that you should embody, express, be that which you were born to be, or that we know that we can identify this is what it is, right? So now, with what it is then now that what has been socialized and that we have named to be female or male, masculine or feminine, understands that I've got a choice of expressing that which I was made to be. I can protest that by saying, okay, well and good, I'm a female, right? I know I'm a woman, but I am attracted to other females, right? Not because I want to be a male. My attraction is physical. My attraction is emotional for another female, right? That's my that's my attraction. That's my sexual orientation. Now, my expressions are different in a sense that, yes, I'm a lesbian woman. I identify as a female. And again, just recently, one of my friends made me aware of this term again that we often use, cisgender, lesbian. He says, we should do away, because essentially when we say cisgender, lesbian woman, we are ascribing that there is a level of normalcy that should come with being a female. Because cis means I'm aligned with. Now, when we compound it with sexual orientation, we confuse people. Because then, what is this thing about? So what she's saying is that my expressions, I may dress like a man. That's a gender expression. That is masculine. That does not suggest that I feel like a masculine man. It's an expression. My sexual orientation, I'm attracted to other females, but my expression is more masculine. But people don't get that, right? Again, Notana comes into another complicated issue of sexual preference. What am I with that lesbian woman? When we are intimate, it's a different ball game because it is about my preference.
It's so interesting, Anela, because I can imagine that one can imagine, that a lot of couples have these questions thrown at them, And before we move on to the other one, to the next myth that we'd love to just throw out there, I just want to really also just find out from you that is there a sense in which maybe what Ilse has asked, just around if you are a gay man, you should be feminine. If you are a lesbian woman, you should be masculine. Is that not also just us imposing heteronormativity on you guys? Is that?
It's exactly that. There's an expectation, like there must be, and again, even within, I like how she always says, community. That's the highest, ultimate respect you can give as a heterosexual person. Not to say those people.
Sure.
That if you can say that community, because it is a community of people who are creating a space of home and safety for themselves, right?
Sure.
But even within that community, there are politics, right? Because you have a lesbian community, you've got a trans community, you've got a gay community. Amongst lesbians, she will tell you there is lipstick, there is this and that. There's a gay guy who's top, a gay guy who's bottom, a gay guy who's versatile. All of these complicated politics within, right? Then that's where these again stereotypes come in, Hloni, because there's one then who then expects that I need to play this part, right? Now, for instance, if I identify as a top guy, right? Remember, and again, that's on the position that my preference is to be the one who receives or the one who gives, right? Now, if I am straight looking like, it disturbs the whole system. Because I'm expected to be strong, right? And my preference should be aligned with that of being strong.
Sure.
And again, it would be in the case that where they say, I want a macho, strong man. Heterosexuality says, no, for you to be in a perfect homosexual relationship, there must be one who's strong
Sure.
and must be one who's soft. Now, when we see celebrities who are both soft but they are married, we wonder, what's going on here?
It's wow. So maybe here's another stereotype that we can throw out there. Sexual fluidity is just an excuse to be promiscuous.
I feel like that's a challenge, not only for the heterosexuals, but also within our queer community. Because now, being bisexual within our community there's a lot of biphobia, whereby, yes, there is, whereby you'd find that either a gay guy would prefer dating gay guys only, so that they'd never wake up in the morning and he'd probably cheat with a woman, because I think it somehow, it bruises their ego. And you'd find lesbians who say they would never date a bisexual woman because they cheat with because in their minds they think that they cheat with the guy. So there's a lot of biphobia in our community because of they're more sexually fluid, if I can say that. And now you being bisexual means that you have access to everyone, which is sometimes not really the case, because we do have bisexuals who says, yes, I may be attracted to both sexes, but my preference is to be with women only.
So, just on that, for me, I'm on a quest of destabilizing life for me and for my sanity. I'm engaging about this concept of being a father or fatherhood. And the question now is the how part. I'm very clear. I'm not pro adoption. I said, I even joke about it with T sometimes, like she can feel pregnant for my baby consensually. When we decide to procreate, there's no connotation of sexual orientation there. It is an act of making a baby. It's not about we decide to do that. So for me, that's where sexual fluidity comes in. I say, I can sleep with a woman for the basis of procreation.
And so, Andile,
not for desire and pleasure.
And now this is where then I would ask you, the Wesleyan preacher. There's a concept that's implicated here. I would love to explore the idea of fluidity as you have explained it, within the context of faithfulness. And within the concept of faithfulness, so you've got your person, and so for instance, for someone sitting at home, they might be thinking to themselves, you speak surrogacy, sure, we understand that. But if you're going to go into the act of procreating with someone else, they're like, I struggle with that.
I'm not bisexual.
Okay.
I'm not bisexual.
Okay.
It is an act for that moment. We're both conscious and deliberate. And remember, it is a moment of making. We're intentional, we're deliberate. It doesn't suggest that I'm bisexual.
Now, I want you to reconcile that within
faithfulness.
our theology. For someone sitting at home, I don't know, Ilse, maybe I'm throwing it out also to you, not Tando. I'm throwing it out to everyone, because I think this is where also the stereotype maybe is also coming from.
Yeah.
How can we reconcile the idea of, because I understand, let's say for instance, I'm a young person who's still trying to figure out their sexuality. Yeah. Today I'm dating Tom, tomorrow I'm dating, give me a name. Today I'm dating Tom, tomorrow I'm dating Noliswa. Yeah. Right. It's at different times. Yeah. My fluidity does not compromise my faithfulness to any one of them. So, in light of the example that you've mentioned, for someone who might be struggling with this concept at home and they're like, just so that we can break the stereotype.
Even in the context of surrogacy, does faithfulness apply there?
Let's hear.
Because
I'll
we are like, it's my sperm to another person. Yes. How does it implicate on my faithfulness there? When we've both consented. Again, for me, what then qualifies is consent.
Sure.
So if we've both agreed and consented that this is what we want, and we're okay with it, then my theological convictions, they are intelligible in this case. Because we've both agreed that we're going to do that. Yeah. Right? Even with the one that I'm requesting to do it with. Yeah. Whatever the intricacies and dynamics of what's going to happen in the moment, it's deliberate.
And often we get lost in those, eh? Often that's where we get lost. We want the juicy details, and that's where we get lost. No, I think what you're saying is so important.
Yes,
but often we get lost in the politics of the how and everything. But topic for another day.
Yeah, I think we've got, exactly like you're saying, topic for another. This is definitely something that I would love to continue chatting about. And actually, find out more about, because I think it's such an important conversation. But we've got so little time left, and there's just
Great.
one aspect of this heterosexual privilege that I really feel like we've underexplored. And that is, if we were to, under my understanding, if I were to define heterosexual privilege very basically, I would say that as a heterosexual person, that I have certain privileges or benefits or advantages that someone who would identify as homosexual would not have in society. Is that a fair definition? Can we work with that?
Amazing, and I like it. You qualified it from a heterosexual person.
But yeah. Okay, so we take that definition, right? If that is our definition of heterosexual privilege, what are some practical ways that we could see how society is structured to privilege or advantage me as a heterosexual person? So if I were to think now, for example, and I watch a movie, let's say I go home and I decide I'm going to watch a movie. A privilege that I have is very likely I'm going to see other heterosexual people on that movie. That's a very practical example. I would love to hear some other examples and other experiences that you guys have of what heterosexual privilege looks like in our world today.
Well, for me, it looks like normal parenting. Because now there are a gay couple that I have seen on TV and on social media and everything, and they experience backlash every time they talk about parenting, because everyone is asking, how are your kids going to grow up without a mother figure? And so for me, it's the parenting aspect to it, and how are the kids going to, as you grow up, how are the kids going to see you? And what are you teaching your kids? That is my biggest question. So being homosexual is, what are you exposing the kids to? So you have to think about that. You can't walk around anyway holding your partner's hand, because what is this kid going to see? Or rather, what are the parents going to say? And even if they do not face me, but it is something that you constantly think about, because you can't freely express yourself without thinking about the next person. Whereas if you heterosexual, you can freely express yourself without thinking twice about anything. Most of the things, rather.
I think you're absolutely right there. I mean, for my experience as a heterosexual person, I don't know when last I really consciously had to think of how, it's not, my sexuality is not constantly thrown in my face. It's not a defining factor. And that's maybe a heterosexual privilege, is that I get to just be without being always asked questions about my sexuality.
And I think another crucial thing that people don't really think about is the bathrooms. Sure. Oh my God. I think sometimes you're just in a bathroom, the ladies, and someone is just like, what is a guy doing in our bathroom? I wouldn't even, with them, it's like, it feels very uncomfortable to be in the same bathroom with someone who's lesbian, because maybe they might be thinking about other things that it's not even in my mind at that time. So you'd find, I have friends who say they don't even use the public toilets because of that backlash. And you'd find trans people who struggle daily with the use of bathrooms, because there are trans males who got raped in the bathroom. There are trans females who got kicked out of the female's bathroom because they do not subscribe to how a female has to look like.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm giving you a task. Go and read Judith Butler on intelligibility. This whole thing of how I view heterosexuality or heteronormativity playing out in society, it's all because of that principle, right? And for me, it's a constant reminder that heteronormativity says you are abnormal, right? Probably one day we need to think about disability and homosexuality in the way of how we frame disabled bodies, and don't ever think that they are sexual beings. Don't even think of they have a sexual orientation. because of their disabledness. Homosexual bodies, when it comes into church and society generally, there's a perception that you are abnormal and we need to normalize you, right? And to get access and privileges to parenting, to a relationship, everything that goes wrong with the homosexual relationships, oh, by the way, in any case. So heteronormativity becomes the lens and the script. It's more like a memorandum of ticking that, this is not right. So that's the power of compulsory heteronormativity, because it constantly reminds the other that, remember, there's a level of abnormality. Yes, you can be a parent, but it's not the natural way.
Sure. You know, there's as we close here towards near the end of our episode today, but there's something a friend of mine mentioned just recently also, and he says to me, Hloni, one of the things you'll never understand as a heterosexual man is the struggle of having to come out every day.
Yep.
Yeah.
The fact that I have to come out every day, I meet a new person, I have to come out. I'm introduced into a different space, I have to come out, so on and on. You know, and as a heterosexual man, I never had to come out to my parents. I never had to say, Mom, Dad, I have to break something to you guys. I'm straight.
Yeah. I think another thing, like just on that, I've never been asked the question, so what caused your heterosexuality? You know, what happened in your childhood? I've never been asked that question, and I've heard so many homosexual friends that have said to me, that's like the one question they hate, because, you know, they can't always answer that.
Yeah, because being homosexual is treated like results from childhood
like something
trauma.
went wrong.
What happened? What went wrong along the way?
Causality needed.
Exactly.
There must be a level of causality.
And also, I feel like the whole concept of being accepted, for me, is coming out. You come out to be accepted, and if you're not accepted, you move into a new space where you'll be better accepted. You don't have to go through that as a straight guy, but as a lesbian woman, you have to be like, you go into a new workplace, you have anxiety whether you'll be accepted or not. You have anxiety whether you'll be told to, you need to wear this, you need to wear that, and if you don't, then move on to the next place. So there are things that you really need to think about on a daily aspect where are you going to be accepted?
Sure.
And it's not a matter of me needing to be accepted. However, if I want to be in that space, then I need to either fight for acceptance or forget about being in that space or belonging in that space.
Oh, thank you for that, Tando. I'm going to be honest, you know, that just hit me very hard. It just shows you that at times in our own struggle with our own identity crisis as a church community, we are so stuck around the philosophy around the community. You know, we philosophize real issues and we never speak into real matters. You know, one can only imagine the amount of kids that have been to churches and they've had to establish whether they're being accepted or not in this church. Going to a school and having to determine whether you're going to be accepted or not. And come on, the process of going to school is not as easy as leaving one shop to go to another. It's a long process.
Yeah.
You know, I remember in high school, and I can think of my own story where we've brought trauma into people's lives. I think in high school we had a group called G Unit. And it was a boys' school, it was the gay guys that we called the G Unit. And unfortunately, so many kids, because now one can imagine, and I just want to really be real for a second here. One can imagine as a child who has not come out to their parents, and you are being rejected into spaces that you are told that you cannot leave that particular space. You have to be in that space. You are rejected in family gatherings. You are rejected at church. Like, come on, tell your mom that you don't want to go to church with them anymore. It's not going to work out well. You have to go to church. You know, you are rejected at school. One can only imagine the amount of trauma that comes with that. Every day.
Absolutely. So maybe just as we close, I want to find out if there's any last thoughts, comments that any one of us around the circle has on this topic of sexuality or heterosexual privilege. Is there anything that you want to, like Anela, I loved what you said, is you have a task for us. Go and read. Is there anything like that you want to share with us as we wrap up today?
I think if, as Methodists, we can understand and use Wesley approaches and lenses of how we approach the world, our understanding of human sexuality, especially non-heterosexual bodies in the body of Christ, we will go far, right?
Yes.
And for us to understand that beyond a sexual orientation, there's a child of God,
Yes.
right? That's the first thing. I don't think of Anela who's gay. One thing, what comes into mind, I'm a child of God. That's it.
Yeah.
And then the rest comes with anything else that comes with it. But if we can be reminded that you are the image of God before anything else, our churches will be full of queer people. But for as long as we get reminded, you must be right with God. And the only way to miss the mark is only by just being gay.
I think another thing is that when he said you don't remind yourself that you're gay, but rather the society reminds you that you're gay. That's Tando, my lesbian friend. And I think in the church, the only thing that we need to remind ourselves of is that I am a child of God, and we need to remember that God is love. And we need to constantly preach love. We need to constantly practice loving one another and be able to preach the gospel of love, because I think that is the only way that we can show support to each and everyone, despite their flaws, despite their sins, because now there is no sin that is bigger than the other, but we are all here to seek God and to find comfort in the Lord. And me being gay doesn't mean that my sin is bigger than yours, or rather my problems are more bigger than yours. Instead, if we learn to love one another, and I think that will be the only way we can be able to educate ourselves about the queer community. We can be able to educate one another on what to do, what not to do, and in the end, I think all of that will be destroyed. What to do and you'll know what to do at the end of the day. If you love me, then you'll know how to treat me. And that's what I strongly believe in.
And I think just from my side, a thought I had this morning, that I will bring into this particular conversation is, whenever the heterosexual man looks at the story of the crucifixion, we adamant that in that story, that Passover story, we are actually the ones who are crucified. We almost certain that, no, man, we are the ones that are up on that cross, because we are the normal. We are the perfect embodiment of godly normality. We adamant that we are the one of the crucifixion, and who have been crucified. But when you learn how much of a square peg in a round hole Jesus was, you begin to realize that the round peg in a round hole is at the bottom doing the crucifying. Heterosexual men, I don't have rights to speak for women, but heterosexual men are actually not on that cross, but at the bottom doing the crucifying.
From my side, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming onto Hot Topics to share your stories with us. And it's really, from my side, I have learned so much. It's just this incredible gift that you have given us. And this is something that one cannot learn from a book. You can learn a lot from a book, but I think there is something so significant about sitting and listening. and hearing one another's stories. And so I want to say thank you to you guys, and to everyone at home. I want to say thank you for joining us for today's conversation. We are hoping that you have learned a lot out of this, and that this will continue to lead into more conversations during your week, and that you will join us again next week for our closing of our Privilege series as we wrap up our Privilege series here on Hot Topics. We hope you have a great week this week, and we will see you next week again on our discussion groups on Tuesdays, as well as next week Sunday for our final Hot Topics. Thanks so much for joining us.